Hello, my name is Alexander Morari, and I'm the founder of ITKeyMedia. You've tuned to our podcast about Central and Eastern European startups that are in pre-Series A or pre-seed stage. We think this is critical stages for every young company, and we want to support somehow these companies in their quest for first business successes, quest for investors, or all combined. Our guest today is no other than Wojciech Burkot, the co-founder of a company called Beit. The company does very simple thing. Basically, you try to design and implement an algorithm for solving a relevant NP complete class of problems using quantum computers effectively. Is that so?
Yeah, and it's not trying, it's do or don't. There is no try. We are in this business for 3 years. However, the basic ideas now materialized in the form of the algorithms which we executed on different hardware, quantum computing hardware, quantum processors, stem from my work since early 90s at MIT, where I got the quantum computing bug.
Have you met, by the way, Scott Aronson?
Oh yeah, several times in different conferences. Most recently, it was 2 years back at Q2B.
Yeah.
We haven't frequented the Q2B in 2019, and this one was virtual.
Yeah.
We were speaking alongside Honeywell.
Let me just make a little step back, if I can. Look, I'm sure that by the end of this podcast, you will make my IQ dwindle like 2 to the power of n times, where n is the number of quantum terms and notions you will use during the conversation, for sure. So at your will, see this process. Let's move on to round one, solution product. You just started describing this in a more general terms, and staying at the general level. So is P equal NP after all?
Nobody has proven this in neither classical nor quantum world, despite the fact that there were many attempts, especially at quantum, and claims that it is so. No, it's not. There is no proof. I cannot say it's not. There is no proof either way.
There's no proof, but proof can be found, or there's still obstacles to...
You are digging deeper. Actually, there is a proof that within the realm of the known methods of proving such statements, there is no proof.
I told you, this is very simple.
Yeah.
And most computer scientists right now believe this is not equal. P is not equal to NP, basically, including Scott Aronson.
Of course, yes, that's pretty obvious. And also he works on the so-called query complexity, trying to establish the limits of what can be done in the black box model. We tried similar approach recently. In classical realm, it means that as long as the data grows bigger, your problems get much, much harder. So if you can do, for example, optimal routing of your delivery van for 20 customers, adding 21st makes problem about twice as complex as finding the optimal route for 20. It's not exactly 2, but something very close. 1 point.
Yeah. Look, there are lots of issues and like unanswered questions in both macro level astrophysics and micro level and somewhere in between as well. And while preparing for this talk, I came to a conclusion that probably quantum computing is a must-have issue or question to work on, just because of the physical limitations of the classical computing kind of foundations, and this, coming down. I mean, the Moore's law cannot grow at the same rate further. So quantum is the only possibility to still develop computing abilities of the humankind. Is that so?
I think, yes, that's on the theoretical grounds, that's exactly this. That it will be getting to the limits of the improvements for the classical computers, and you see how it affects the business globally. But there is more to it, right? As long as you make your transistors and the gates and processors smaller, they are inevitably approaching the quantum limit, right? So once your gate current in the classical transistor equals to one electron passing, you are in quantum realm. So it's like not only that it offers something which cannot be done classically, but you are inevitably entering that regime because of the miniaturization. Small things are quantum, in short.
Yeah. And switching to your own work, why have you chosen the hardware agnostic approach?
Because you cannot tell what the hardware would win. I'd like
Yes, yes.
to make parallels between the situation with quantum computers today and the cars at the beginning of 19th and 20th century turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were cars with 3 wheels, there were cars with 4 wheels, 6 wheels, steering front, steering back, engine, wherever you want it, right?
Coal powered.
Now every power, and yeah, of course, and the steam powered, the diesel and the gasoline and electric. And now, except that we are entering an era for the electric cars just before, every car looked the same. And the same thing will happen with the quantum computers. There will be the optimal way of building a quantum computer, and that's what people would use. That's the optimization of the hardware. So we cannot actually get wed to any of the existing technologies because they might not scale to provide the ability to run relevant commercial loads.
Not quite consumer level product, but those
Definitely.
higher level of problems.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, that's very easy to say that the at least first and maybe next generations of quantum computers will clearly be replacing today's high performance computing with more capabilities, as you said, with ability to compute what's untractable today, but also delivering more computing power. And that's very clear. It will be HPC and not your smartwatch or something of that sort.
So you are a hardware agnostic, but just as a side note, so there are a couple of approaches to quantum computing: superconducting, IBM, Google, Intel; trapped ions, Honeywell, IonQ. I found also spin-based silicon qubits, and Australian companies working on that, and photonic. Do you have your own favorite in this chase?
In this race, from the technologies you mentioned, it will be silicon or germanium for that matter, for some reasons. But that's same technology, right? It will be either that or photonic ones. The full scale, I think I will bet on photonic, and we don't have very many and very big ones at that moment. There is another part of the statement which you didn't use so far. So yes, we do work on the hardware agnostic algorithms, but also a lower layer just about above the quantum firmware provided by others, which is hardware aware implementations. And we are gaining most in that area, right? We are gaining so much that we were able to run quantum computations, cornerstone quantum algorithm. Nobody else could in the whole world on both of those architectures. So both for the superconducting qubits on IBM Q and for Honeywell ion trap machine, we achieved the actual results from the run of coveted quantum algorithm and structured search.
So there's the philosopher's stone.
Definitely.
Yeah, and technically, is the code the same, or do you have to somehow tailor for each of the hardware types?
As I said, hardware-aware implementations. So
hardware
we do
okay.
tailor, and actually we don't run a single algorithm. There is a bunch of them, slightly different, and the difference is subtle. It's all unstructured search and all optimal in the sense that scales as with the growing number of the search elements. It scales as well as the best ones, probably formal mathematical proof, but it's a bunch of algorithms having the same properties, slightly tuned towards different implementations.
Okay. And you call your, let's say, family of algorithms Quasar, right? Is the main.
Well, no, Quasar is just the internal tool one of our engineers wanted to open source, and he did. And will be collaborating with the IBM stack. It's convenient tool in a sense that it can generate code from higher level algorithm description to the particular machine. So we don't spend time doing this by hand. We just put the algorithm concept to Quasar and tell Quasar what machine it should generate code for, and it does so.
Okay. So a type of a kind of a prism, right? That you put your algorithm through.
There's plenty of names, you know. Everybody does it for themselves. You have the, but mostly this is done by hardware vendors, meaning they work for the particular machine with some extensions. So you have Circ for Google machines, you have Quark for well, Quark is actually universal, but you have tools by the vendors. Qiskit by IBM, and everybody wants a Forest by Rigetti. Everybody wants to build their own, and we can generate any code for any of those machines directly from our stuff because we use libraries which use proprietary techniques. We patent a lot for the future. It comes from the assumption, from our assumption about how long it would take for the commercially usable quantum computers. So it looks like it is a proper scale for working on the basics and protect our IP with patents.
Interesting. So would you say this is a very long-term kind of game?
Oh, definitely. It is long-term because there will be no quantum computers capable of running commercial loads, which can be run on today's HPC.
Mm-hmm. And factoring in all the investments, all the brain power to be invested into this area as well. When do you think the commercially viable applications could be?
$1 million question. Do you have my $1 million? I can answer. On the answer to this depends very many things in that word, right? So most recent quote I've heard was 10 years. When we started Beit, I was thinking 7 years, and that's what we put into our grant application 3 years back. I think I'm slightly more pessimistic those days, meaning the progress is slower because not enough people are working diligently on the hard stuff. Everybody wants to live in the dream world and of the final applications, which cannot be run because there is no hardware nor the software to support them. The high-level concepts are known for chemistry, for protein folding, for catalysis, but there is a far away before the actual hardware can run this, and you cannot simulate that because it is hard, right? So that's
it's beyond classical abilities, right? So to say.
Yeah, the limit is about the Google experiment from 2 years back, right? 50 odd qubits, 50 gate depth, and then you cannot do the classical simulation on the existing supercomputers. IBM had different opinion on this, but they never actually ran the code. And the other side wasn't fully fair either because, as you can imagine, the Google skewed the playing ground towards their advantage. So essentially the machine simulated itself.
Yes.
No classical machine can do this, but simulating itself means that there is no overhead. So they were doing the easiest experiment for Sycamore they could. And that's fair. That's the great achievement. But you have to understand that Sycamore is not really good at doing anything else.
Yeah. Sycamore is the Google's quantum with its chandeliers.
Processor Now, what you see, what your Hans described, is just the chiller. It's the thing which cools the superconducting chip down to millikelvins. It's very tiny. It looks like the normal silicon chip for the naked eye.
Mm-hmm. As a side note, I wanted to share this with you. It seems to me that working on like quantum computing is like working on opening a wormhole on the astrophysical kind of level. And you, by achieving viable, quantum computing kind of era, so to say, it's like creating, because you're working on creating a curvature in data-time continuum. Do you agree?
I could agree if I follow if I follow your metaphor. I would agree. Yes, that's the step improvement in the computational capabilities for the future, for things really relevant for humanity as a whole. And I'm not exaggerating, right? If you can tell how proteins are formed, how they are folded to act as they act, that's the matter of life itself, right? And this can be simulated on quantum computers in the future. Catalysis, like the nitrogen fixation, part of this stuff. We use Haber-Bosch process to produce our fertilizers. Yeah. And one of 3 nitrogen atoms in your body comes from this process. It can be tagged, and it is tagged, and one of 3 nitrogen atoms in your body comes from this process. Meaning that were it not for this process, the population will be smaller by 1/3, right? Mm-hmm. You cannot support more people without the fertilizer. This is an extremely expensive process, and we know for the fact that there is a better way. Certain microbes, certain plants do it. We cannot replicate this. And our process is extremely expensive in the energy, the pollution. So finding the better catalyst for the Haber-Bosch, or it will be different process, but for the nitrogen fixation is again something which future quantum computers will do. We know how to do them if we have a machine big enough. And that's again extremely important, way more important than warehousing, logistics, and the stuff which we are optimization in general, which we are
which you are showcasing on your website as well. But I understand this is just commercially viable, like immediately commercially viable.
And we have partners stuff. Actually. Yeah. We have partners where we can test real stuff, right? That's as opposed to hypothetically testing algorithms. So we do this stuff too, but it is the mathematical proof for the scaling for the future. But without implementation, it means nothing. So we need to have both. Be able to run this and show that it will scale for the future.
What I like, and what's promising for me as well, is the material simulation. That's of interest as well.
Same thing, but you know, I think that's something way more viable, even on the near-term machines, and we kept repeating that for quite some time. We have some ideas how to make that even more efficient, and this comes from the quote from Feynman from 80s.
Yeah.
When he said something like, the word is quantum mechanical, damn it. So if you want to simulate that, you better do this on the quantum system rather than trying to do this classically with known difficulties in modeling quantum systems on the classical machines, right? So that direct simulation, rather than going through the long loop of the equations, which are solved using quantum processor, direct simulation seems very promising for the applications like you just mentioned.
Feynman also mentioned, something like in the lines of, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't know enough, right? Maybe that's not the correct quote, but that's the more or less the...
Well, actually, and he continued in saying that, for physicists is extremely funny because that's the guy who was able to abstract really hard computations in particle physics into drawing pictures, graphs, Feynman graphs, right? Yeah. So he knew exactly what he was doing. Nevertheless, humbly, he said that after spending like 30 years on this, sometimes I have a vague imagination how this all works or how the photon behaves, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is hard stuff. It is hard stuff that luckily you can find people who have brain capacity. Let me backtrack. Important thing for us was hiring the right talent, right? Getting to Beit is harder interviews wise than getting to Google. I can tell that I was at Google and I'm at Beit, so that's for, you can take it for a fact. And finding people is hard. Nevertheless, once you do it the right way, you see that you can teach people. When we started, there were something like 80 people globally working on the algorithms for quantum computers.
Yeah.
Now it is like 800. But still, our engineers are in the top 5, 10 usually globally of everybody who attempts or has capacity to do this.
And one of the recent challenges by IBM, right?
Yep.
So 3 of your team members finished in the top 10 out of 2,000.
For the second time in the row. And actually the winning solution, beating Adam's one, came kind of late. It was accepted and it's fair because it was better, but they given more time, Adam would get even better solution. It was IBM Qt Challenge, and they did that for the second time in the row, placing 3 of them placing in top 10, and they do that after hours essentially. So after the work at Beit, they play with that challenges.
Guys, we need to repeat this again. IBM Quantum Challenge, right? Was the second Quantum Challenge, second time in a row in the top 10 globally. Yes, 3 top 10 finalists are from Beit team. And I want to add just this thing. The total number of applicants or contestants was 2,000, not because this is the number of all people who wanted to join. It's just IBM imposed this limit. I guess it will be like many dozens of, maybe, right? Dozens of thousands, because that's an interesting...
To illustrate the difficulty, just to illustrate the difficulty, the last challenge, the hardest, was attempted, and so they got any solution by just 200 people globally.
I like Scott's quote that I found on his blog. If, just to finalize this part, and then there will be one more breach and we move on. If P equals NP, then the world would be a profoundly different place than we usually assume it to be. In a nutshell, how would you explain that?
That's exactly this. If P equals NP, then the whole complexity hierarchy breaks down, right? And it has physical consequences. So there would be stuff happening if P equals NP at something which we are not ready for. Yes, that's despite the easy words, it's a statement of the profoundly deep fact. The world would look differently if the complexity hierarchy collapsed. You know, just let me backtrack. I think that your listeners might use this. Let me reverse roles for a second. Do you know what the NP means?
I mean, yeah, of course. I've been preparing for this as for exam. Yes. So non-deterministic,
polynomially bound.
Yes.
So essentially, that was the early idea of modeling how the human brain works. Essentially, this is a class of problems where your best way is guessing the solution. So because the calculating it is extremely expensive, requires a lot of resources, meaning time or the computing power, especially if the data set is large. But verifying the solution, it's much easier. So you verify in polynomial time, but that's the polynomial part. And then the non-deterministic is that it's very hard to get the solution essentially by guessing is as good as any other approach. So that's NP. That's how we work. Given the mathematical proof, you can follow it using just logic, right? But finding the first proof on unproven theorem is extremely hard.
Yes.
And that's the P is verification. NP is finding the first proof of something unproven before. So the world would definitely look much different if P equaled NP.
And let's not even dive into different complexity levels, because I found out NP is just one of the many areas encompassed in bigger areas. And then
still, without going there, there's on the hardness scale, not having much to do with the complexity classes, there are problems which have been solved efficiently, meaning in polynomial time in respect to the input size on quantum computers. And there is no solution so far, or there will never be a solution in the classical world. One of them is factoring, and it is linked to the RSA internet encryption, essentially.
Speaking of RSA, by the way, if quantum computing era comes, would you say? I mean, we focus on the positive side, but I think just as the nuclear physicists had to be responsible or thinking of the negative side of their discoveries and advances. Do you sleep well? Do you understand if you are successful, if the whole like community of quantum computing players are correct and you achieve what you're longing for? There might be good things, but then this is a tool that can be used for bad stuff as well. And hacking Bitcoin, one thing.
It's not only about the future.
Yes.
Actually, the frequently overlooked part is I have nothing to. By the way, you asked the personal question. I have nothing to hide. I'm the netizen for like 30 years. I worked on the first internet connections in Poland because they were done by physicists to connect to CERN. So I'm pretty sure that whatever I put out or into the computer which is connected to the net is public information from that moment on. So I'm very careful what can be available on any of my machines which are connected to the net. But once there, I'm completely free. I don't care much because I did the selection earlier. So having said this, there is frequently overlooked area of that. There is a bunch of people spending big money now on storing everything they can find on the web with the idea of collect now, decrypt later. A lot of stuff which many people would not like to go public is stored in an encrypted form or transferred in an encrypted form, and those secrets will still need to be secrets like 20 years from now. And there are people who are storing those data in the hope that they will break the encryption which protects them, namely RSA with the quantum computers.
So what seems to be classically secure, quantum-wise will be easy to crack. That's what I want to say. And we can change the past.
I wouldn't make such a general statement because there exist methods now of the classical encryption, which will be hard for quantum computers too. So you can go into the particular applications of the elliptic curve based encryption and you will be safe. There is no known way of breaking them efficiently with quantum computers. Nevertheless, the more simpler encryption patterns are easily broken by either RSA or by the brute force attack using something which we are working on, like the Groover's unstructured search. So without any information, you find the right thing and then verify that it is the right thing. So you find the key and you know it is a key because it decrypts the data.
So that's high time, you want to say, to future-proof or to quantum-proof your data if you are government or big corporates or any other individuals or bodies, organizations with high-level data sensitivity, right?
Don't make it available on the web in any form, encrypted or not.
So is it a flight back to paper, you want to say?
No, you just don't need to plug your machine to the web, right?
So local storage. Wow.
Yeah. Secrets should be kept local. And actually there are many organizations which work that way.
So guys, here is a security alert from one of the frontliners of quantum computing, basically advising everybody to go back to local storage. if you
Well,
want to be safe.
if you have that
Yes.
kind of the need, right?
Yeah.
I don't care if anybody gets my password for my bank since 20 years back. I couldn't care less,
True.
right?
True.
But
Yes.
they might be stuff which will be important when it can be decrypted.
Yeah. Yeah. Wojciech, make a bridge, please, from what we discussed right now, all the pluses and pros and cons, benefits and disadvantages of quantum computing, to what you were doing, to the algorithms that you are working on.
We're bored with the theoretical work in a sense that it's easy to talk about the algorithms. There were not that many. It's hard, right? But we wanted to make sure that our ideas can be implemented. So there is no better way than to go like with the proper induction proof in mathematics, right? Let's do something. Step one, let's show that it works. And then let's prove that from the fact that you can run it for n, it follows that you can run it for n plus 1. If you have those two things, you have something which will be used in the future because it will scale with the growing capacity of quantum computers. That was the dream. Mm-hmm. There were plenty of technical details. There were plenty of machines we tried, and they were finally implementations this year. After 2.5 years, 9 patents. By the way, Google has 89 patent applications. We have 9. We are in this business for 3 years. They are for at least 13, and their resources are much bigger than ours. And it was us who were able to actually make that happen on both IBM Q platform for superconducting qubits, and then on Honeywell, which was several times bigger than what we were running on IBM. Yeah.
So here's another kind of news alert. Beit beats Google by per capita patents received or applied for. by far.
Please cancel this. Please cancel. No, well, maybe not by per capita, right? I think I don't have any insider info, but I think that their quantum computing group is something like 100 people. So per capita, we might be even, but other resources taken into account, definitely not. But we do patent, and we make sure that our patents are relevant in a sense that if you have something which makes sure that you can run commercial loads like 2-3 years earlier, and it is not dependent on the hardware, and you can prove that it will be holding, that dependency will be holding in the future, you have something of value. And that's the value we are building in this company. Our IP, there is nothing else. Yeah. We don't have any other product. It is just the IP of making the quantum world happening like 3 years sooner than for everybody else.
Wojciech, let's move on to round 2, competitors in a nutshell. Who would you say are your strongest 2-3 competitors, and how are you better, and how do you beat them now?
Actually, there is something which I like to say, the Metcalfe's law. There is a cutthroat competition between hardware vendors. Yeah. It's ugly. It is ugly. It is happening. You can hear from the tone of commenting each other's achievements, right? Across the board. There is much more collaboration in the software world. I hope it will stay that way. And our biggest competitors are those who are diligently working on the details rather than the future potential applications. So I would name Q-Control from Australia, and I'll name the QCware, slightly higher position on the software stack. I would name CQC from the UK, and not many others. There are many other quantum computing software companies, but I would name as our competitors those guys. Luckily, we occupy slightly different layers of the software stack, so we can actually combine our solutions and go to the customer together. So collaborate rather than There is an overlap. There is an overlap when we do compete, right? But there is a added value from combining our developments in those different layers of the software stack.
Is this complementarity with your competition a part of your design, or is it just by chance?
Both. So when we knew where everybody else is, we either decided on competing head on and show that we are stronger, or when we saw that there is a potential for collaboration, we reach out and we spoke and then decided on something which benefits both sides, right? So, for example, we will never be selling quantum compiler despite Quasar being able to run with anything, as with other software. Have you ever heard of the recent compiler for any language which is sold for money? No, there's no such a thing, right? Because it's relatively easy to write, low barrier to entry, and everybody needs it. And engineers generally love improving stuff they know can be built. So I think there is more quantum computing compilers than there is quantum computing companies those days. There are some which have more than one.
Okay.
So we will never compete with ticket of CQC, despite if you go to the optimization, our code produces shorter quantum circuits, so they can be run easier. But yeah, it just doesn't matter. It's not the advantage.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I just hope it stays that way, because it's very early in the market and there is a lot of hype, a lot of companies which just they sell vaporware, and there's few who are actually doing real stuff should work to make the pie bigger. It is Metcalfe's law, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
The network is as strong as the square number of the number of the participants if they exchange information. So that's perfect model, right? We should be working together to make the pie bigger, because it's very early stage. We can compete head on down the road, not today.
Yeah. To bake the cake, a bigger cake quicker, you want to say, right?
Yeah, that's essentially in a nutshell
Wow.
what we think we should be doing, and many have that attitude. So we talk and we work with many of the big players, and it's easy, when somebody says that they have quantum idea, I'm just checking not the credentials but the merits, and it's very easy to get acquainted with the companies we never spoke to if we just point them to our publications. The return is immediate. Yeah, they see that we are for real, just like they are, because we are not reaching out to any others. So that's easy.
Yeah. I caught myself thinking this kind of scientific fraternity kind of feeling, right, or atmosphere. Is it just because it's too early still for the
I think it is, and partially
commercially minded sharks? So
I think it is. One thing, it is early, and the other thing is that most of those startups have some sort of the academic background, right? Those are people who left academia or are still in academia and doing the quantum startup. There are very few people outside of the academia really understanding quantum to the point that they can start their company delivering something of value.
So there's the cutoff line, right?
I think there is a cutoff. There is very high entry cost at that stage, but it is just intellectual in a sense that the team has to have the brain capacity to deal with this, and that comes with the academic credentials usually.
Wojciech, let's move on to round 3, companies' ups and downs. What's the biggest success by now of Beit?
Very clearly, word-based result for unstructured search, being invited to the conference where the speaking spot cost something like $100,000. We never paid. We never paid previously. We were invited, and we were invited to 2018 conference with the results on the D-Wave, and this year we are invited to be with the results on Honeywell. People recognize our contribution to that point.
What about the biggest failures?
Oh, many.
Just
Many
not the ones
failed.
related to external kind of situations and impacts and so on, where you made a mistake as a co-founder, CEO, maybe.
That's a good question. The most recent one, when I made a mistake, I think we didn't have patience or we didn't negotiate hard enough on the valuation at our last round, right? We lost too much of the company to investors. We could have done better.
Wow, that's a revelation. How come?
How come? Many people do that, especially in Poland. And I'm just a side note with my CEO and co-founder at Beit. We are also running a Polish deeptech VC fund. We are actually running 4 different funds because we are pissed off with the VC world here. I'm very open about this, right? So those. I think that we will not be losing the control, 3 of the co-founders of the company for next 2 rounds. But still, I think that we gave out too much and it was very easily attributable mistake. It was my mistake. I just didn't pay attention to our initial save from the CDL, which had a cap which worked against us at the round, because the round was much higher, at a much higher valuation than the safe.
Interesting. We'll cover funding a little bit later. But as far as your own admitting to this mistake, what do you think you might have done differently?
We shouldn't be accepting money from CDL. We should go through the acceleration. In Toronto, it was great. We got a lot from this, and we still corroborate. Just letting you a small secret, most likely we'll open, that's actually funny. We are incorporated in the US, Delaware company, who fully owns Polish R&D site. That's the model I worked on for many years at Google, Motorola, and others. That's normal. But then we'll also have a subsidiary in Toronto, Canada. And we are just in the process of setting this up. So we'll be truly international in that respect at least 3 locations. So that's the result of our work with CDL. And that's how we want to run this company. So we are pretty international at this stage. We could have played that better.
What's the lesson for fellow startup founders? I mean, in a nutshell, it's a very general thing to say we could have done better, yes, but how exactly? What, to get second opinion?
Clear, right? And when talking to our portfolio startups who are also deep tech, I'm just coaching them on avoiding the mistakes we made, right? So for example, when I learned that it might be getting public pretty soon, one of our portfolio startups is going for the financing round sometimes next year, and they just closed the safe. And I made sure that their safe doesn't have the clause which made us lose equity. So they are better than us in that respect. So that's very clear. Avoid people wanting you to sign 200 pages long investment agreements. It's just wrong, right? It means that there is a bunch of lawyers making money of those startups. The money for the startup should go for the development of their core product, not for the legal fees, and so on and so forth.
And so the conclusion would be more focusing on what, industry investors? I mean, or industry...
not knowing the industry, matters, right?
Yeah.
We haven't taken the industry investor yet, but the thing is that when you speak about the things that matter, rather than the contracts and what happens if you fail, what happens if the valuation goes down, that's important for some of the VCs. It's not important for the real ones who know how the mathematics of the VC investing works. So, I don't care whether as a legal penalty, I'm getting 100% of the company, which is worth exactly 0. And that's what the contract will do.
Mm-hmm.
So focus on the matter. Just the anecdote, when we were going for the past round, there was just one VC which wanted to have a look at our code. I found it amazing. Everybody else just trusted our word, and that was nothing wrong with this. but only one had the capacity to check whether we are doing proper software engineering, quantum or not, rather than trusting the third party, because that's how it happens many times, or ignoring the problem altogether, right? Instead, focusing on the lengthy legal document with tons of traps inside. It's just this, right? So if you are doing deep tech, make sure that you have investors who understand deep tech.
And you speak the same, they speak your language, not that you speak the language of their lawyers, yes.
Exactly. And the lawyers have their place, right? We, being American company, and quantum being a protected technology, we went under CFIUS limitations. This is the
what's that?
set of acts of the US which limit transfer of the cutting edge technology for double use or military use technology, and quantum is in that area, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
So being registered in Delaware, it was funny actually, because the US government didn't want us to take on UK-based investors because they were not American. We never set foot in the US, right? We were doing that from Krakow.
Again, there's a formal reason to try and push you, so they will use it, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Interesting.
And then then you talk to lawyers in Washington, and then you talk to lawyers of your investor, and you have your own lawyers. But it's kind of different conversation than what usually happens in Poland.
Yeah, we have not touched on the wonderful combination of quantum computing and military applications. Of course, that's a topic for a completely different conversation probably, but definitely there will be lots of power games around this space, right?
You bet.
Let's move on to round 4, and I hope this will be a breeze for you. Team, you have the best team in the world, basically?
I think so.
Yeah, 3 co-founders with very deep academic roots, Paulina Mazurek, yourself, Wojciech Burkot, and you have also Witold Jarnicki, all have lots of years spent in the academia world. What about the rest of the team? Because it's easy to find out details about yourself and your co-founders. What about the rest of the team? What's the labor division between them, and how are you?
Come on, and that's something, yet again, I see tons of startups really focus on building structure. Who is in product, who is in the development, who is in the quality assurance, who is leading the whole thing, who is legal. Guys, the experience from, and you quote our academic credentials, but I think that what shaped us was 8 years together at Google, in the roles from the individual contributors to engineering director to program manager. That were our roles at Google. So we follow a lot what we learned there, and that's what shapes our team. So take it from me. If you have a team of 10 people, you should be ignoring any structure. It's just waste of time, your time and the time of your people. It just doesn't serve any useful purpose. So we have, let's say 13, 11 are engineers doing technical work. I'm doing technical work. My people would kick me in the ass if I didn't, right? So my name is on some of the patents. My name is on some of the publications. We do it together. And there is no need for the structure. Yes, there are people who have more focus on mathematics, so they check the proofs, right? There are people who are more comfortable to writing the patent description, so they write patents. And those are just roles. So we switch. If we change projects, somebody else will be doing this stuff, and we swap roles. So you don't need structure for such a small team. You would die were it not for Paulina, who is dealing with all the external world, who insists on papers, signatures, Excel sheets, and the stuff of this nature, and the help of the admin who takes care of dealings with the NCBR, for example, and so on and so forth. Everybody else, 11 out of 13, are doing technical work, and any division in the team of 11 is just useless.
as far as resources you need for companies like Beit, you need just what? Brain power and combine in different architectures, so to say.
Brain power, and what we need to prove that we are delivering the real thing rather than snake oil, access to the real hardware. And again, I'll let you, so it's interesting. I'll let you a small secret. Many of the companies allowing us to run our stuff on their hardware originally claimed the IP to whatever we run there. And many startups will be stoked to be able to be on the publication list, or the author list for the publication with Google or IBM or whoever. And we walked from those deals, and they came back with different terms. So we are keeping our IP despite running our stuff on their machines. It is tough for a small startup to deal on equal terms with the large corporate. And again, our experience from the corporate world helps us find the right way to make that happen.
And again, that's some revelation, some news. We jump from one news-making item to another. Just to make sure everybody understands, guys, the regular terms is that all the hardware, quantum hardware kind of vendors and providers, they force you agree to terms that whatever you do on their machines, if you don't pay for that, you lose all the IP. All the IP rights.
Lose is maybe an exaggeration. It's phrased much more nicely, but eventually you let them use that without paying you anything, right?
Yeah. And so Beit, I understand, thanks to Wojciech, to big part as well, agreed different terms, and you can use the hardware without compromising the IP that you are in.
But it was a bet. I wasn't sure that we will win. We just walked from the discussion when we heard we cannot be, that's a quote, and I will not name the person who was saying that. I hope he will listen again, because I keep repeating this just for him. We cannot be held hostage to anything which can improve our computers. That's what he said. And that was the moment when I walked out from the conversation of the partnership. It would be great from the PR perspective, announcing our partnership with the big player. No, we are not going to pay with the IP for the PR stunt.
Yes, interesting. For the short term.
Yeah, short-term gain, and not even gain, ego stroking, right? More or less.
Ego stroking, yes. Wow, interesting. With this little sensation, let's move on to round 5. We covered a little bit, but anyways, we have a separate round for this. We call this Formula F3, Funding for the Future. And just to help you with the coming to the status quo where we are right now, I understand your funding history by now is around 1.5 euro seed round, and before that a grant of around 2 million euros, right? So altogether somewhere 4.5 million euros.
Well, you should add something like 80K from the accelerator. We took the SAFE, which converted at the round. And yes, more or less, except for this 80K from the seed, it's more or less what happened. We got some other grants for covering our IP, patenting in the US costs money. So we got another grant, the small grant, contributing towards this. It's like 400K Polish, and that's it.
And you did manage to attract investors not only from US, as you mentioned, they were trying to limit you somehow, also from UK and Canada, right?
We do have the Bloomberg, we have Canadian investors, we have CDL as the partial owner via their Spectrum 24. We have Firebolt, the great guys from Silicon Valley. We have Kindred, who is our lead investor. We have Manta Ray, and we have a bunch of high-profile angel investors, including Charlie Sandhurst, originally from IBM, from Microsoft.
Yeah. What's the plan for the next year in terms of investment?
Funding?
Yeah, funding. Do you need anything?
We are pretty scrappy, and we don't pay for access to the machines, and we don't pay for conferences because we get invited. So we have a runway depending on something. Oh, one more thing important in hiring, which is related. We hire every talent we can lay our hands on. If we find somebody who's better than us, we hire him, and we'll adjust the runway to the person because this is a real capital at this stage. Never hiring freeze. If we find somebody capable, better than us, he'll get hired if he wants.
In a nutshell, Wojciech, what's the hiring process then to your company?
Mostly it starts with recommendation. We didn't have much success with any other path except for some really bright Canadian some time ago. Then you have 2 independent interviews testing math skills. They don't touch on quantum unless they explain you what they mean by quantum, and then they might be something which is mathematical question, a puzzle, or the equation to solve efficiently and stuff like this. 2 independent of those, and then recommendation to the hiring committee. We talk, we check whether there is a fit. We never go for the hiring manager assessment because we don't have a hiring manager. We never go for the soft skills because we are all kind of crazy. So testing for craziness doesn't make much sense. It will be more crazy when we get the next good person. So then there is a recommendation and we made an offer.
And that's an ongoing process, right? I mean, hiring.
And this is an ongoing process. We never stop.
Okay, great. So you were saying about runway and the investment plans for the next.
So yeah, I broke because I've seen the dependency on the actual staffing, and that's why I can give you just a range. We have a runway till August or December, depending on how many people we hire in the meantime. And so we'll be closing the round sometime first half of next year.
Okay. Any criteria of the fund that you can share or expectations in terms of how much?
We are happy with Kindred, and they follow something which we follow in Bitspiration Booster, the fund which we founded with Paulina and others.
You mean as LP?
That we don't lead 2 rounds in the row. It's easy to cheat on your investors if you are leading 2 rounds, because essentially you are buying the investors from the first round, the smaller fund, with the money of the follow-on investors from the second fund. We never do this, and they never do this. So we'll need a new lead investor. Most likely it will be an investor from either US or Canada. We haven't decided yet. We have offers from those locations. Big recognized funds, known for the deep tech investment and with contacts which we need.
Okay, so you're all set up as far as the next investment round. Okay.
It looks like from the initial declarations, we are speaking December, right? And the round will be sometime first half next year. We have oversubscription now, so yeah, depending on how much money we really want, it'll be subject to negotiations, but we are not short of the willing investors.
Wojciech, that's been a great chat. I'm sure we could go on forever, but let's stick to the scenario, and we are now over with the rounds that we have for this chat. Having in mind this is second half of December already, that when we're recording this, do you have any wishes to the audience in Poland, Europe, or globally?
Well, in Poland, I really encourage the good deep tech startups. It's funny when you are running cutting edge technology startup, and you have to compete against your portfolio startup when you are wearing the other hat, right? They are doing exactly huge strides as we do in different areas, and I'm really pleased with this. So if you are doing deep tech, you are a small startup doing deep tech, we can help. We are deep tech, we understand deep tech, we invest in deep tech, and we are Yeah, I should cut here. We are kind of different, not only in the understanding, but also in the financial terms. We are not trying to rob you of the equity in your company.
So here's Wojciech Burkot wearing his investor hat right now, inviting deep tech startups to for a coffee, right?
For a coffee. Yeah, let's talk. If you have cool technology, we are always interested.
Wojciech, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alex, very much.
Thank you very much. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Today, I want to finish this podcast on a more serious note. I think quantum computing is a realm for few to fully comprehend and for the very few to develop and evolve. And my personal conviction and hope is that we, the humankind, we have to finance and to support the crazy ones to cover the road. Even if the final destination is a dead end, I'm dead sure that the byproducts will justify the efforts and resources. Listen to the very relevant final lines of a poem by Robert Frost, Roads Not Taken. I think these lines very much are the motto for what people are doing in quantum computing right now. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. That's all for today. Bye-bye.